All right. As part of Heartbreak's training for the Bank of America Chicago Marathon in partnership with Nike Running and Nike Chicago, I have a very special guest with us today, the most decorated American distance runner of our era, Galen Rupp. Hello, Galen.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for making some time for my athletes and people training for Chicago. I'm going to do you a better intro than that. Don't worry. But just some context. We have athletes for whom the marathon is just a bucket list item, a personal challenge. We also have people who self-identify as die-hard runners who are definitely familiar with you and every marathon. But I just want to give people a little context, a little bit more about Mr. Galen Rupp here. So to the uninitiated and the fans who want to hear it again, here we go. Galen is a Chicago Marathon champion from 2017. He was runner-up last year in 2021. On the track, he's been a force across 2 decades. He won every single 10,000 meter U.S. championship or Olympic trials from 2008 to 2016. He represented the United States in the Olympics of Beijing in 2008, London 2012, Rio 2016, and Tokyo 2020. He has the hardware to prove it. He earned a silver medal in London over 10,000 meters, and he earned a bronze medal in the marathon in Rio. He placed second in the Boston Marathon in 2017. He won the past 2 Olympic marathon trials in 2016 and 2020. And yes, that is an abbreviated list of Galen's accomplishments. So you'll have to tolerate that, Galen. Thank you so much for making time for our athletes. It's really special to hear your wisdom in our context. So thank you. Anytime.
Just leave out that 2 decades part. That was a little weird here, and that's been that long.
It's true. I know. I was thinking. I was like, I could call you a young man still because I'm older than you. But you're becoming you're one of the elders now. Still. All right. So it's our athletes right now. They're about 3 months out from the race, and about a third of the way into our training block. So it's week 7 of roughly 20. You know, when you're that far out, when you're 3 months out from your focus race, how are you thinking in those moments?
I mean, 3 months out, you've kind of gone through that initial shock of like getting back into training. Like even for me, it's always a shock when you get back going. It's important to rest, I think, or, even if you're just getting started, it's tough getting into it, but hopefully by now you've gotten into a little bit of a routine with training, and it's getting, not easy, but your body's getting a little used to the pounding and just that routine of getting out there regularly. So, I think with 3 months, I mean, this is really, you're kind of entering the meat, of your training block when you really want to be hitting it hard. And it should still be, you're still building up, you're still adding a little bit more week in and week out. So you don't want to be trying to hit it super hard right now because there is still a ton of time. And, at this point, I think the goal should really just be consistency. That is by far the biggest thing that is going to help you get ready for Chicago and the marathon is just having, weeks and weeks and hopefully months and months of really consistent, uninterrupted training. It's obviously you can get tempted into hitting it and pushing it a little bit, when you have those days where you feel really good. But it's super important right now that you're doing all the little things to try to take care of your body, trying to keep as big of an emphasis on recovery and sleep, specifically right now. And really just aim for, trying to get in a lot of solid work. Any one workout is not gonna, predict or make sure that you have like a great race in Chicago. What's gonna do that is stacking workouts on top of each other, and that consistent training is gonna be the biggest thing by far.
That's awesome. So you're really this is why I wanted to have these conversations. You just hammered home so many things that I talk about all the time. One of the things was generally for beginner athletes, I write 20 weeks of training. And there's always for me a tension where people say, well, I Googled a bunch of plans, I saw 16 weeks, I saw 12 weeks. And I said, you can do it as shorter as long as you want. Our advanced marathon training plan is probably only 12 weeks because that athlete is running 80 miles a week or 100 miles a week when they're not training. I want people to be able to feel the rhythm of what training feels like, what a hard day, an easy day, a long day, a couple hard days, a couple easy days, what it feels like to get into a rhythm and then keep that rhythm steady. So thank you for reiterating our coaching.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great. You know, I think like even just looking from like a volume standpoint, you know, a lot of people will say, well, I had, you know, 1 or 2 weeks or even 3 or 4 weeks of super high volume. So, but for me, you know, I always looked at what I would average for, like you said, 10, 12 weeks. What you average in that period, you know, that's really more indicative of the kind of shape you're in, as opposed to, you know, anybody can have 1 or 2 weeks of great training, but it's when you can look back and go calculate and see, like, I held a pretty high level of training, whatever that is for you, for 10, 12 weeks, you know, and then you start to rest for 2 or 3 weeks after that. And, you know, you had whatever building up to that point, you know, that's really, that's the shape that you're in, you know, more or less. So it's, you got to really take that long-term approach. And, you know, again, it's easy to get excited for a couple hard weeks of training, but it is a grind. You know, the marathon is a grind of a race, and the training is a grind. And the more that you can embrace that and, you know, get through weeks and weeks and weeks of consistent training, that's going to be the best thing for your performance.
Yeah. So we have a couple different groups here. We have a beginner and an intermediate group that we'll be speaking toward in this context. And this is one of those weeks where the beginners are looking at a recovery week. So what I frame that as is basically the long run comes down so they can regroup a little bit and get ready to, you know, summon the energy to keep driving ahead. First question, do you have weeks like that where the mileage comes down, or is it more an effort change? And then in your kind of recovery weeks, what's your state of mind going into that style of long run where you know that's the objective?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost I would say when I was running on the track, we had those weeks almost built in, you know, when you would race throughout the year, because you would have these little dips where, you know, maybe it was just 1 week, or sometimes it might've been 2 weeks for a really big race that your mileage was down a little bit. You know, you still had to keep it up, you know, training, getting ready for a big race at the end of the year. But you kind of had those weeks built in. And even with the marathon, you know, sometimes you get sick, you get injured. And, you know, I've always looked at, you know, even if you got to take a few down days or a week a little bit easier, sometimes it's just your body telling you, you know, you're kind of redlining it with what it can handle. And you need to embrace that. Other times there are definitely a little bit, I wouldn't say I necessarily have a lot of down weeks, but certainly, you know, it might be 2 or 3 days or 4 days where you really take it easy. And, you know, I've always believed that as hard as you should want to push yourself, you know, in training, you can't be scared and so hard-headed that you're, you know, unwilling to take it easy and take you know, embrace like having a very slow jog, embrace like having a day off here or there, or 2 days off. You know, that's, again, it's not going to kill you, especially when you look at in the context of that, you know, 12, 14, 16, 20 week block, a couple of days here or there. I mean, everybody has those. And even if it's a week, you really should embrace that and make it easy. You know, I've seen so many people over the years, you know, guys and girls that I've trained with, that they're just hesitant, and they have it in their mind that they have to always be pushing. And, you know, that's stress. You know, even if you might not be running as fast, if you're kind of having that mentality of like, I always have to push, you know, I don't think that that's good for you. So, you know, it takes a different kind of toughness, I think, to embrace rest and be okay with that. And, you know, I was talking with a friend the other day, and, you know, they were even saying just on some of your easy days, it should be more of a challenge of like, how slow can you run? How much recovery can you get out of it? Not how hard can I make my recovery day? Right. You're still beating yourself up, you know, right. And, you know, you got to remember these weeks and days are designed to help you perform better in this next block coming up. Exactly. So take advantage of this time, you know, don't fight it. If it's perfectly okay, you know, and I've realized that more as I've gotten older, that it's, your body needs rest just as much as it needs to train hard. You know, nobody is able to just push as hard as they can every single day. And, you know, taking a little bit more rest is going to help you push harder in those days and weeks that you're really trying to. So, you know, I think it's for my opinion, it's better to have those big peaks and valleys as opposed to having like everything more balanced out where your recovery days are harder, but your harder days are not it, a little easier just because you're not able to push. I'd rather have my hard days super, super hard because I'm going to get a ton of confidence out of that. Yeah. I'm not getting a lot of confidence by saying I ran my easy run, 10, 20, 30 seconds a mile faster. Like I'd never look back and think about that. So just take advantage of these times. You're going to look back and say, I was able to hit this long run out of the park. I was able to hit this workout out of the park. And those are the ones that you look back on when you race and say, man, I'm ready to go. So again, rest is just as important as how hard you're able to push yourself on those hard days.
I love that. I love the rewind to think about that. When you go back and think about your workouts, no one ever says, well, I ran my easy runs a little bit harder than I thought I should. That's not the confidence. You don't look back at any log and say, oh, that easy run was a little harder than it should have been. Yeah, I'm feeling, It's a great way to look at it. I'm going to come back to that one a lot. So our intermediate athletes have a different assignment where they're going a proper long run, kind of broken up into thirds. Warm up the first third, hit their marathon goal pace the next third, and then crank it down if they got it for the final third. When you approach a long run like that really starts easy and builds toward, hard and is a kind of a workout long run, how do you approach that mentally?
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the bread and butter, there's nothing, if you had to like look at any one singular thing, that is by far and away the best thing you can do to get ready for a marathon. Nothing replicates just, being on your feet for a long time. You get your legs tired. It's continuous. You're not running intervals where you get a big rest. So yeah, I always put a huge emphasis on those days. And I really take some time, the night before and even the morning of, and really try to put it, again, in that context of running a race. Obviously it's not going to be a race effort every time in training, but you really want to break that up and think of it like you would on race day. And I think taking just a little bit of time, even if it's just 5 minutes, everybody can, you've got no excuse not to find 5 minutes, the night before or the morning of. Just take a little bit of time and break that run up, as you said, like, and really visualize, like, connect it to the race. That first part, even though you're running easy, you want to be really cognizant of staying relaxed and just, keeping your mind, calm and at ease when you're just as you were if you were running a race, those early miles of a marathon. And then obviously you get into race pace stuff. That's going to be a little harder and take a little bit more focus. So again, you want to have already conserved as much energy as possible warming up, so that you're able to hit that hard. And again, realize that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to feel good, but you're able to hit it. And I think that's usually the most important thing. And just, again, thinking about it like a race. Your legs are going to be tired at the end. And if you can pick it up, there's no better practice for trying to replicate that feeling of like having dead legs and still be able to pick it up at the end. These are the workouts where you start to learn that, because it's a skill. And so much of it for me is about, you kind of relish the opportunity to replicate those feelings and really cement what it feels like. And again, if you have a good one, really make sure that is just cemented in your head, like how you felt, how you were able to get through it, things that you did really well, mentally, physically, to work through those patches. And, it's also important to take time after you finish just to reflect on that and make sure that is so clear in your head. And also, if things didn't go well, that happens to everybody too, and how are you going to fix that next time? Or what are you going to work on the next time you do one of these long runs? And, that's what practice is for. The more times you're able to do this stuff and experience that, it's just going to help you that much more on race day, because you've seen it all. You'll have had long runs that have gone really well, and you'll be able to draw back on those experiences and, how you handled everything. And the ones that didn't go well, hopefully you've learned enough from them in the course of the workouts that by the time race day comes, it's not something that's totally unexpected, and you're able to, keep your mind a little bit calmer and keep your body a little bit calmer and back off and work through those patches. Because again, it's so much of the marathon is mental. And the more that you can experience that and really, again, just get those feelings so ingrained in your mind, in these workouts, that's what they're there for. Sometimes you hit and it goes really well, sometimes you don't, but you'd rather have that happen in practice than in a race. But you don't want to like just go in, not really thinking about a workout and do it and then forget about it the second you're done and go move on to something else. So I think taking that time beforehand and afterwards is critical.
I love that. When it comes to fueling beforehand, do you fuel, the night before your long runs as militant as you must before a race, or are you a little bit looser? How do you approach, again, 3 months out or so, heading into a long, hard workout? Are you obsessing over nutrition in the lead up, the night before, morning of?
I mean, for a big workout, like where I was really running hard, absolutely. If I was just going easy, sometimes I might get a little, more easy going with
Right.
what I eat the night before. But, I eat a ton of pasta regularly, just during the week. And, I'd say that I've got my nutrition is pretty dialed in, I definitely have a lot of pasta and bread the night before a race. And, I pretty much do the same thing for any big long run. But if you don't have a routine or you've, had some problems, I think that, again, it's a great time to practice that. Try some different foods, see the ones that you like and really find out what works. You never want to be going into a race and be guessing or saying, well, I think I should do this. Like race week mentally should be like, you want to be as relaxed as possible and have everything already worked out, that you're not having to worry about decisions here or there. And the morning of as well, I would say practice that, practice the timing of when you eat. I usually eat 4 hours before the start. And that's worked really well for me. Some people eat a little further out, some people eat closer. But during these long runs is the time to play around with that and experiment and really find out what works for you.
Yeah. When it comes to during the run fueling, fueling on the run, in a practice context, is that something that you ever play with, or do you try to stay with the fuel plan as you would on race day? Obviously on race day, you're trying to maximize performance. You're going to do your absolute best, perfect fuel plan. In practice, do you ever play with that? I know some people do, some people don't. Are you always just trying to maximize the performance, or do you try to sometimes maybe under fuel to fight through that experience? Do you ever toy with those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like when I'm running really hard, certainly I'll keep it pretty consistent. But it also depends on, the timing of the race I'm going to run, the time of year and just being prepared for whether it's, if it's hotter, obviously you're going to drink a little bit more. If it's colder, you're probably going to drink a little bit less because you're not losing as much fluid. So I definitely play around with that stuff in different amounts. For me, we always drink every 5K. We have, our special bottles get put out. So that makes it a little easier to plan, as far as like, that's what's going to be in a race. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in training. It's every 3 miles I'm going to be drinking. But certainly, if I'm going to be running, in Chicago, it can be really hot. I guess the weather can be kind of unpredictable there too. So you never know, but if it's a little bit warmer out, and especially now in the summer, play around with, maybe drinking a little bit more or trying to drink a little bit more frequently. But lesser amounts and see what you can handle. I do think that you can train your gut just as you would train any other muscle in your body. And so if you're someone that has a hard time keeping fluid down, I think that, again, practice is the time to really start playing around with that stuff and slowly add more and more fueling. If you're finding that you're running out of energy and really like bonking, at the end of some of these long runs, you probably need to add a little bit more. But again, you'd rather find that out now than when you're on race day.
Right.
So certainly, play around with it. For me, I'm trying to think of what I usually drink. I probably, I fill up it would be a third of like a 500 milliliter bottle is what I have at every stop, generally. Sometimes I can be a little bit more, sometimes I can be a little bit less, and I'll have like a drink mix. So sometimes I'll play around with different concentrations of that. And that kind of goes to, again, the warm and cold weather. If it's cooler, I'm going to have probably a little bit more concentrated because I'm not going to want to drink as much. If it's warmer and I'm going to be getting more fluid in, I'm going to have a little bit less of concentration. But you want to make sure you're still getting in, the same amounts of, sugars and carbohydrates, and just be practicing drinking early. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, is they wait until, halfway or a third of the way through. And at that point, if you're just starting to drink, if you're thirsty and you're just starting to drink, it's too late already. It's something that you have to be very proactive about, drinking early and often to make sure that your body stays good, because your stomach and everything can only absorb so much, and if you wait till late, you can't just pile in a bunch of Gatorade or water or whatever it is. It's just not going to get in there in time. So definitely those are all things that you want to kind of get dialed in, especially on these longer days.
Every question comes down to practice, 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 team. You hear it. You hear it from the man himself.
It is. I mean, it gets lost sometimes, and even, I'm guilty of it too, where you forget the whole point of all the training and stuff is really just to get you ready to perform. So it always has to relate back to a race for me. And, if there's things that you want to, again, you just want to have everything dialed in, so that you're not having to think too much on race day, and it just kind of becomes second nature.
You're teeing up my next question perfectly, because you're an athlete who I think of as a gamer. You show up on game day, on championship day, ready to perform. That's what you're known for. I listed big wins there, and that you don't leave the Olympics with hardware. You don't win all those championships without showing up big when it matters most, right? That's what makes, not just a professional athlete, a professional, but like an elite world-class performer. The championships, the champions who you think of, the Michael Jordans, that's what they're known for, is showing up for the championships. And I think you're known for that. Absolutely. And for some of our athletes, their championship, their big game there is this Chicago Marathon. So what are I think you just outlined a whole bunch of tips, but to reiterate, what are a couple tips or mindset things that help you just always be ready on game day?
I mean, for me, I always fell back on my training and the work that I'd done. I mean, that's, when you mention other athletes, maybe they're different, but I think it's the hours and hours of work that they put in, and they take it so seriously, those 364 days a year, that when they're ready to compete, or they really need it the most on that 365th day, they've done it, and they fall back on that. And again, I'm not going in thinking I got to be Superman, in these big meets. And I think it's a mistake when you think you somehow have to do something, superhuman on race day or on competition day, whatever sport you're playing. The chances of that happening are so slim. It's like 1 in a million. Every once in a while, the stars align and things just happen, and that's great. You don't have to really be ready mentally or do anything on those days when you just happen to catch a flyer and, everything comes so easy. But it's so much of it for me has always just come down to preparation, and I believe in my preparation, and it's, the focus and the intensity I think that I bring to everything day in and day out that allows me to perform at those levels when I'm asking my body and my mind to do the most. And so really, again, that's why these weeks, marathons might seem so far away in the future, and you have all that, but this is really the most important time that everybody's coming into right now. And this is where all that work and all that, intensity needs to take place is in these next 10 weeks, 12 weeks. And it's that's going to give you the most confidence. I think just, again, having a routine, I talked a lot about it earlier, is huge. Race week, you want to be just as zoned out and relaxed mentally as possible. You don't want to be worrying about what are you going to eat, where are you going to go, what are you going to do? Like everything that you've done in training, it should be very similar or the same, I would say, on a race. You know, it's all those excitement and nerves is totally normal. And that's, you know, kind of what makes racing special, is that it only happens that one day and you've got to get it right on that one day. But if you've done the work, you stick to your normal routine, you have a really good race plan, and you really stick to executing it. You know, anything can happen, but those are the things that are going to put you in the best position to succeed. It's just, it really, for me, has always come down to discipline. You know, it's discipline daily, discipline in your training, discipline in, you know, taking care of your body, so that you're not injured, or if you are injured, doing all the little things to really make sure that you can get back quickly. And then it's discipline on race day and, you know, the days leading up, about making sure you're resting, staying off your legs, you know, right before, and then following the plan. You know, it's easy to get caught up in emotions, and, you know, Chicago is obviously a huge marathon that, you know, you have to fight that temptation to want to like be like, oh, I'm so ready to go, I'm so hyped up. Like I want to be as totally relaxed and almost mellow as possible at the start, because again, it's a grind and it'll catch up quick. You know, if you get caught up in all that hoopla at the start, it's just so easy to get out of your race plan, get off your pace, start thinking about, oh, I feel good, and you get sidetracked. And so it's about staying disciplined that first half. You know, I don't think it's very rare that people finish a marathon and will say like, I wish I had gone earlier, or I wish I had gone so much sooner because I have all this extra energy. Like it's such a long ways that anything you can save in the first half of that race is going to come back tenfold, you know, in those latter miles. Yep. But if you go out too quick, you're going to be hurting, and it is going to feel like a long way. So again, just discipline and not going out too fast, and really trying to conserve the first half of the race is another thing I would say be big.
I love that framing, that it's really not that your gamer nature, the performance on championship day that we see and know, is all about really what you're saying is executing what you set as your standard, making sure that you can execute that by like staying relaxed, staying in the moment, and performing at your capacity. Almost pointing out that on the other side, if you're not a gamer, you know, that something's getting in. You know, if you're a professional athlete, you should be able to rise, but you're almost indicating that it's the ability to relax and trust yourself and be in the moment that affords those great performances that we see. It's not something superhuman. It's the standard you've set over the course of all the weeks, that expressing itself as it should.
I mean, it's like, it's almost, you just don't want to panic or freak out. I mean, and that's, nobody will ever want to admit that, but that's what happens, I think, in moments. I mean, it's like everybody's dribbled a basketball or shot a basketball. Those guys have done that millions of times. But why do people make, you know, kind of boneheaded decisions or plays? And they start to panic, you know, and running is no different. Like you get in, you know, whether it's halfway or, you know, 18, 20 miles in, and so suddenly things don't go what you think they might go. It's like how you deal with that. And that's why when I talked earlier about all, you know, visualizing these workouts and cementing, you know, in how you dealt with things, and really taking some time to reflect on all that training, you know, that's where that comes from, that you're able to like say, all right, you know, things happen in a race. How do you deal with it? And it goes back to how you've dealt with it on a daily basis in training. And so that's why these things, you know, these workouts and everything leading up to it are so important, because that is what you fall back on. And when people panic, or they start saying, oh, I went out too fast, or, oh, you know, I'm not where I wanted to be at this part in the race, or I'm running by myself. I mean, it's like that's just your mind and all these external factors it's taken in, and it just freaks out. And so, you know, the more you can, it's important to replicate that. And the more you can do that in training, and deal with all those various scenarios, you're going to be that much better served. And it, again, I keep saying it, but it becomes more second nature, or you're not having to think so much during the race, because again, you put yourself in that position, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can't ever worry about, failure, I think, in a race, but it always goes back. You fall back on your training and the preparation that you've done.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit here, this interview will come out next week. We're not so far. We're talking about the Chicago Marathon and a distant look for some athletes. For you in particular, you're looking at the 10th opportunity representing the United States in a World Championships or Olympics. I mean, that is in itself is something I think people should pause and say, damn, that is a lot of high level running. This time I think it must feel so incredibly special to you. You're doing it on your home turf is, I think, such a cool thing. Can you talk about, what you're looking forward to, how you're feeling about these World Championships in Eugene?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled. I've had this circled on my calendar ever since they announced they were going to be in Eugene. I'm so fortunate. I feel like when I look back and all the opportunities I've had to run, like really big meets down in Eugene, like, huge invitationals, obviously pre-classic they have every year. And then, I made my first Olympic team down there, all the national championships. There's nothing better, and I always relish the opportunity to compete down there, being from Oregon, being a Duck and going to the U of O. I mean, there's definitely a really special energy, I think, that you feel, from the fans down there and the support. And there's a reason a lot of my best races in my career have been in Eugene, I remember people telling me before I went to school there that, you're gonna feel this, buzz and lift on the last lap sometimes when you're dead, and you got to use that to your advantage because that crowd will carry you, when you're feeling, dead tired, like you're not going to be able to make it. And I didn't really understand it until I went down there. And then I did have, a few of those moments where I would experience that certain, it's like a specific roar that you hear, and it just gets me fired up to compete. So, the marathon, again, like, I'm going to have to temper that early on, but I'm hoping in those latter stages that the fan support is going to help me out. And I just couldn't be more excited. I'm going to have a lot of family and friends down there, and it's just going to be an unbelievable opportunity. I don't think the Olympics are ever coming to Eugene, but World Championships is going to be the biggest meet ever. And the fact that this is the first time they're here in the U.S. and it's in Eugene and Tracktown, it's going to be awesome. So I really can't wait to compete down there.
I can't wait to see you. I'll be cheering from afar. I know it's going to be a special thing to watch. I feel like it's your homecoming as much as the homecoming of the World Championship. So best of luck. So excited to cheer for you there. And thanks so much for all your insights for our athletes.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Okay. Good luck.